I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Welcome to the Vietnam Veterans News Podcast. News of interest about Vietnam veterans from a Vietnam veteran. Now, here's your host, Mac Payne.
This is Mac Payne here with episode 1811 of the Vietnam Veteran News Podcast. News about the Vietnam War and the brave veterans who served there, as told to you by yours truly, a Vietnam veteran. The primary purpose of this podcast is to pay tribute to the great Vietnam veteran generation, one as great as any that ever heeded the call of duty from its country. In this episode, I'm going to tell you about a group of Vietnam veterans that are sort of like Rodney Dangerfield. They don't get any respect. Before I tell you about this group of deserving Vietnam veterans, my good buddy Willie Thomas has a message for you.
This episode is brought to you by Legacy Staffs, which are crafted by the Brazos Walking Stick Company in Waco, Texas. You can go to brazosticks.com and use the name Mac Payne, one word, at the checkout and get 10% off your next order of the Legacy Staff or cane of your own design.
Make sure you act quick to get your Legacy Staff because we don't know how long the guys out at the Brazos Stick Company in Waco, Texas are going to offer this tremendous 10% discount on their products. You definitely want to get one of these Legacy Staffs. I have one and I love it. I'll guarantee you, if you get one, you will love yours too. And now, let's take a look at this group of unsung heroes from the Vietnam War. And that is the military police that served in Vietnam, better known as the MPs. In this episode, I'm going to be specializing on the Army military police. Don't want to slide all the others like the APs and the Air Force and the Navy and the other services. The Army MPs were near and dear to me because I was in the Army over there in Vietnam. I saw them in action. You never hear anything about the MPs, though. All you hear about are the people who were fighting the NVA out in the jungles or the mountains, the DMZ, the Ashall Valley, the Ai Drang Valley, and all those places. You never hear about the tremendous job that the MPs did over in Vietnam. Today, you're going to hear about one of those MPs and realize that he is right in there with all those great Vietnam veterans. He not only served his country in Vietnam in a difficult situation, but he came home and continued serving his country. He did a good job at it, I know, because when the Vietnam veterans came home, they were older, wiser, stronger, and better able to deal with adversities than their non-Vietnam veteran contemporaries. The Vietnam veteran I'm going to tell you about today is John Horn. He is originally from Vallejo, California, which sits just north of San Francisco, California. A few years ago, he relocated to God's country, and that is Helena, Montana. He's living there now, and that's where they wrote a story about him in the local newspaper, the Independent Record of Helena. The title of the story is Stories of Honor. Helena Army veteran John Horn recalls time as an MP in Saigon during the Vietnam War. This story was submitted by Curt Synness. He did a great job telling the story of this Vietnam veteran who was an MP in Vietnam, and he was assigned to working the downtown Saigon beat. You may think, well, he had it easy. He was in downtown Saigon. After you hear the story, I think you'll agree with me that the MPs over in Vietnam deserve more respect and admiration than they receive. Let's take a look at the story that tells about Vietnam veteran John Horn as he served as an MP in Saigon. He was there from 1968 to 1969, and yes, he was on duty during the Tet Offensive. It was tough down there in Saigon during the Tet Offensive, and this story is going to testify to that when you hear about the casualties his unit suffered. Let's take a look at this tremendous story. Dateline, Helena, Montana. There's seldom a dull moment with the military police during times of war. Helena's John Horn, who served as an MP in Saigon during the Vietnam War in 1968 and 69, experienced his share of tense encounters. But over 50 years later, Horn lists among his highlights the fact that he never lost or broke my glasses. That's an accomplishment to be able to say that if you were an MP. John Horn grew up in Vallejo, California, as a big fan of baseball, San Francisco Giants, and the NFL 49ers. After graduating from high school in 1965, he attended 3 years of college at Vallejo Junior College and Diablo Valley College. John enlisted in the U.S. Army in October of 1966. His father, John D. Horn, was his military role model. As an Army artillery private, the senior Horn was a D-Day +2 veteran. After attending basic training at Fort Lewis, Washington, he went through military police school at Fort Gordon, Georgia. With an Army Occupational Specialty Code of 95 Bravo, he was stationed at the U.S. Army Air Defense Command Nike Missile Site LA-78 in Malibu, California. That must have been rough, serving in Malibu, California. Wonder if he ran into Clint Eastwood there. Continuing. During one of the war games, I was declared dead when I was actually playing pool while most of the unit suffered. He recalled with a grin. Horn deployed to Vietnam in September of 1967, assigned to Company B of the 716th MPs, Saigon. There he served with static and roving facility security through April of 1968. On the morning of January the 31st, 1968, a date that will live in infamy, 27 men in his unit died at the beginning of the Tet Offensive. Horn said he was AWOL when he voted in his first presidential election. I was on a 30-day leave after extending my tour, and I overstayed 1 day to vote. The first sergeant was perturbed when I got back to my unit. Next came a stint with the MP and combined patrol through June of 1969. Horn, who had attained the rank of Sergeant E5 in July of 1968, served as a driver and then patrol leader with M113 Armored Personnel Carrier, APC, as a member of the Quick Response Team. In 1969, Saigon was a big metropolitan city that happened to be in a war zone, he said. It had all the good things and bad things that big cities have. Horn explained that roving patrols in Saigon at that time could include a U.S. Army MP Jeep, a 2nd Army Jeep with an M60 machine gun, a Vietnamese MP Quan Con QC Jeep, and a Saigon Police White Mice unit. If I remember correctly, white mice referred to the police over there. They wore white shirts and gray pants, and a smart police cap. I don't know how effective they were. I remember one time we were out on the highway going somewhere doing something, which I don't remember. But the bridges along US 1, the bridges along Highway 1 were guarded by the white mice police. One time we were held up because a bridge was burnt down to the timbers. I wondered how that happened because that particular bridge was being guarded by white mice policemen. Blowing up a bridge is one thing. The VC just go in there, put the charge in there, and blow it up. But burning a bridge requires someone to go in there and pour some gasoline on it or whatever, and then light the fire. And then once the fire becomes evident, somebody should do something, call the fire department or get out there and start throwing water on the fire. But these white mice police who were guarding this particular bridge apparently just stood there and watched it burn down to the water line. I hate to be critical against the white mice, but I've always remembered that incident. Why didn't they do something to prevent that bridge being burnt to the water level? But that was all right. The engineers over there were incredible. They could fix a burnt bridge or a blown-up bridge in no time. We hardly stopped at all because they had it fixed in no time. The way the engineers over there would fix a blown-out bridge, they would just bring in bulldozers and push a lot of dirt into the river around the bridge, and we would keep going. Of course, they would fix it later with culverts or something, but they didn't hold up those convoys very long on Highway 1 in Vietnam. I know that because I spent a lot of time out there. Gave me an opportunity to get away from the unit. I always hated it in the unit, and any time an opportunity would come up for me to go anywhere out on the highway or anywhere else, I would take it. All the other people would say, "Oh no, it's too dangerous out there." And I would say, "Send me, I'll go. Anything to get out of this place." Pardon me, I don't want to get too deeply into that subject. Let's continue with this story. At 21, I was a Sergeant E5, and that was my parade-related horn, who is now a young 73. Among his most vivid memories was the time he arrived on the scene after a Green Beret private stacked up a couple of airmen, when he took a grenade away from a drug-crazed GI and the arresting of a racist colonel. I bet he enjoyed that the most, arresting that colonel. Horn described responding to a call in a downtown Saigon bar. Once inside, he saw a smallest soldier in jungle fatigue standing at the end of the bar, next to a beret and a beer sitting on the counter. "They tried to take my cover, Sergeant," the Green Beret told the MP, nodding toward two blue-uniformed Air Force men laying on the floor, one unconscious and the other groaning with his hands covering his face. Horn and his partner learned that the soldier was assigned to a U.S. Army Green Beret unit 20 miles south of the city and was told by his CO that he needed a break and should go away for a couple of days. We made sure that private had some cash and gave him a ride to a safe hotel where he could get some sleep and a hot shower, recounted Horn. Our duty log entry was, "Spoke with proprietor, no disturbance, continued patrol." You can tell John Horn was a very wise MP. Continuing, another time his driver had to see his girlfriend, so they were out of their district when he walked up to a soldier in an alley that was threatening to pull the pin on a grenade. "We did a little dance. He went home," Horn said. It would be interesting to find out more about that little dance. Continuing, near the end of his tour, they picked up a drunk colonel while on overnight patrol in Saigon. Horn said the colonel called his African-American driver a racial epithet and took a swing at him, so I put him in hand irons and took him to HQ. I'll bet that was his most pleasant arrest. Arresting a drunken colonel. Continuing, my short-time attitude probably did not help the situation. Horn was discharged in June of 1969. 3 years later, he met his future wife, Nancy, at a Renaissance festival just outside of San Francisco. A Great Falls native, she was unimpressed at first, but he hung in there, and they were married in April of 1973 in Reno. Speaking of Renaissance festivals, those things can be a lot of fun. I went to a Renaissance festival over in Sarasota, Florida once. Have you ever seen one of those situations where all the stars line up and everything's just perfect? Well, that's what happened to me over at the Renaissance Festival, because they had an axe-throwing booth where if you could throw an axe and hit a target, you would get all sorts of things. Little did they realize that I was, and still am, an expert axe thrower. Actually, hatchets. I started out throwing bayonets up in Duck Foe when I had a little time on my hands, and I graduated to hatchets. Got pretty good at it. At that festival in Sarasota, they give you 3 hatchets, and I put all 3 of them right in the dead center of the target. They were all amazed. That's why every time I hear the term Renaissance Festival, I get all excited. One time in my life, the stars lined up perfectly, and I put those 3 hatchets right there in the bullseye. Got a lot of oohs and ahs from the crowd, and a nice certificate. I am an official expert axe thrower. Enough of that. Let's get on with John Horn's story. Horn worked at Sutro and Company, Inc., a brokerage firm. The couple soon moved to Concord, California, into a house they purchased with help from the GI Bill. That was a wonderful thing, the GI Bill. You could buy a house and go to college free. Continuing. Every summer they visited Great Falls, and after their daughter Megan was born in 1978, they considered escaping from the crowds. On October the 31st, 1979, I put my wife and very young daughter on a plane to Helena with the admonition, "Find us a place to live. I'll be there with the U-Haul in a couple of days," said Horn, whose son Michael was born in the capital city in 1989. Since then, he has worked multiple jobs here while performing 2 productions at Grand Street Theater and now retired over 10 years. Thinking back on his time during the war, Horn told of the ongoing joke in the unit about the guys losing or breaking their glasses. It had to do with scuffling and apprehending offenders, but also sometimes just trying to help a drunk GI into a cyclos, which was a 3-wheeled bicycle cab thing, he explained. John Horn made this proclamation: "I am proud that I never lost or broke my glasses." It's nice that you can say that. Being an MP in Saigon and dealing with all the things he had to deal with. I take this opportunity to issue John Horn, Vietnam veteran and Saigon MP, an official Vietnam Veteran News podcast salute for your service to your country, both in Vietnam and back home in California and Helena, Montana. I'm sure you did a good job. That's my opinion, and I'm sticking to it. This is Mac Payne closing out episode 1811 of the Vietnam Veteran News Podcast. Thank you so much for listening. You are cordially invited to return again soon and often to hear more of these stories on this podcast, the Vietnam Veteran News.
How about that? Ain't that a mess?